Adam, what kind of paperwork do you use when you're bringing on an employee?
So, legally speaking, there's not many legally required documents to have in place. Okay, you have to I-9 or E-verify to ensure that the worker is authorized to work in the United States. Most states have some type of registration requirement where you have to register the employee with the state. So there may be some paperwork in that regard. You want to make sure you have your W-4 completed for payroll purposes and addressing the employee's withholdings. And there may be a couple of other state or local required documents to complete, but the recommended documents is really what I want to briefly touch on. And that's, having an employment agreement in place to address the material terms of the employment arrangement, you know, responsibilities, obligations on both sides, how the individual is paid, what the individual is to expect, and what their obligations are if things do not work out. And then on top of that, the employee handbook, which is basically the compilation of workplace policies and procedures that you want to put your employee on notice of so that they can have the commonly addressed issues addressed essentially in one document. And on top of it, it also is another document which sets expectations for your employees. So, getting the employment agreement and the employee handbook done properly to address those material terms and those material expectations is absolutely critical before you ever issue those documents to an employee. Now, that's to a W-2 employee. And I know a lot of companies out there also engage 1099 contractors. What are some things you would suggest that a company have if it were to engage a 1099 contractor?
Yeah, so say you're working with another company, or you're working with somebody who has lots of other clients in the industry, and so they're not going to be working for you, full time or even part time. It might just be for a project or something. So in those cases, you need to put in place a services agreement. There aren't really regulatory requirements if somebody's not a an employee like you just described, which is why it's appealing to people in some instances. But you do want to have a services agreement that says what they're going to do, how much you're going to pay them, and it makes it clear that you're not providing them benefits, they're not an employee, that kind of thing. But if you don't have that, all of a sudden you get into this weird place where maybe you haven't discussed if they're an independent contractor or an employee, and you get into this weird place where you haven't had that discussion. So I think the most important thing is to have that discussion, see what makes sense in the circumstance, and then put in place the appropriate agreement.